Our first reading today is from the book of Exodus, chapter 17, verses 1 through 7. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" And then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the place Massa and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" And from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verses 23 through 27. Jesus entered the temple courts, and while he was teaching, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him. "By what authority are you doing these things?" they asked, "and who gave you the authority?" Jesus replied, "I will also ask you one question. If you answer me, I will tell you by what authority I am doing these things. John's baptism, where did it come from? Was it from heaven or of human origin?" They discussed it among themselves and said, "If we say from heaven, he will ask, 'Then why didn't you believe him?' But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the people, for they all hold that John was a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." And then he said, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things." May God bless the hearing and the living of this word. And further from the writings of Emanuel Swedenborg, Secrets of Heaven, number 8554. The previous chapter dealt with the internal sense with a third temptation, a stage when goodness was lacking. The present chapter deals in the internal sense with the stage that came after the people had been given that good, a fourth temptation in which truth was lacking. This temptation is meant by the grumbling of the children of Israel because they had no water. So they were given the truth of faith by the Lord, which is meant by the water from the rock of Horeb. So, my friends, we are now in our third week of journeying with the children of Israel in the wilderness. And by now, the themes are probably starting to sound a bit familiar. And there's a reason for that. We all know that there is nothing easy about extended trips with a lot of people. How many of us have hurled this command towards the back seat of a car? "You stop fighting or I'm stopping this car right now." So we might well resonate with Moses' frustrated cry, "What am I to do with these people?" Traveling can bring us face to face with our flaws as we are challenged to be resilient, flexible, patient, and resourceful. And this is one reason why these wilderness stories can speak to us so deeply about traveling on the path of life. All the ways in which the children of Israel were challenged, we find in them a picture of how we are challenged. For we're all human, are we not? And so this week, the Israelites are still traveling from place to place, and they reach a place called Rephidim and find that there is no water to drink. And of course, they start sniping at Moses and again wonder why they were on the journey at all, if they were just going to die of thirst. And the Lord answers them and bids Moses strike a rock with his staff so that it might flow with water for the Israelites to drink. And like last week, This story is a picture of a kind of temptation or spiritual challenge that we might experience during our life from time to time. So let's contrast it with last week's story. Swedenborg tells us that the story of the manna in the wilderness from last week speaks to a challenge in which we can't seem to find or feel any goodness in our life. So, in terms of our experience with these difficult times, for example, this might be like having sadness and disappointment with the state of the country or political discourse or the behavior of other human beings. It might be fear around the direction we're going. It might be cynicism that nothing we do matters. And the question for that story last week was, do we believe that the Lord is working to bring goodness and love and growth into being in large and small ways, no matter how challenging things might seem? And if we can believe that, we will see the manna that is available to us, like in the story. Now, this week, we get a picture of a different type of temptation. Bread represents goodness, and water represents truth. The Israelites were thirsty, desperately thirsty. And this is a picture of a challenge in which we cannot seem to find or feel or see any truth. A temptation in which we are thirsting for truth, wanting to know what is real and right and true. But for whatever reason, it feels obscure to us. Can anyone resonate with that right now? We are all drowning in a sea of opinion, hot takes, and diminished or untrustworthy authority at the moment, holding fast to the narrative of our particular team. And it makes us perhaps feel unmoored and off balance. Water all around us, but none we can truly drink, none that will quench our thirst. But it might be helpful at this point to make a distinction. There is a difference between facts and truth in a larger philosophical sense. Many times in our social and political realm, people might say they want to know the truth, but what they really want to know are the facts of a matter, facts that represent the reality of a matter as closely as we are able to discern. And this is a really important thing. Transparency and accountability matter. A shared allegiance to facts is what allows conversation and collaboration to flourish. And when we can no longer agree on what is a fact, conversation becomes impossible. And then there is the larger notion of truth. Yes, the word truth can certainly be properly used to describe facts that do represent reality, but also the word truth can describe precepts that are beyond factual proof. Ideas like the dignity of all human beings is important, or we all have responsibility to each other, or that honesty, sacrifice, and service are honorable traits, or God is here with us even now. And that last one is often the final central question in many of our spiritual challenges. The Israelites were wondering, is the Lord among us or not? And as we read the story, that doubt might seem incredible given the miracles that God had already visibly wrought for them. But I think it is a doubt we can all recognize, right? Is it not the secret heart, the secret cry of many of our own temptations? And we look at the world right now with all its challenges and we wonder, where is God? Is God among us or not? How does God engage with the world? What is God calling me to do? And we want answers to these questions that feel true to us in that larger sense of the word. And so, we resonate with the exhausted, traumatized, thirsty Israelites wondering, is the Lord among us or not? But turning that vulnerable wondering into a concrete complaint. How can Moses, and by extension God, let us camp here without water? Moses is exasperated, and so God engages in a little religious theater. He asks Moses to take his staff, the very staff that convinced Moses of God's power, and the very staff that was used to convince Pharaoh of God's power, and in front of the elders, which are the leadership of the Israelites, Moses reminds the people of this truth once again, that God listens, God cares, God will provide, and God has the power to do so. As water gushes forth from that rock, and we look at that water through the eyes of correspondences, we are likewise invited to ask, what gives truth its power? Its power to be able to speak to us, its power in action, its power to represent what is truly real. Swedenborgian doctrine is unequivocal. Goodness and service give any truth its power, and connecting with this goodness is how God is among us. I would argue that you won't find a more foundational doctrine in Swedenborgianism than the assertion that truth takes its life and soul from goodness. For truth to actually be true, it must forward, perpetuate, and advocate for goodness and love and service. And if some principle is devoid of goodness, then it can never be spiritually true, no matter how true it sounds to our brains or to our egos or to our emotions. No matter if it calms our fears or makes us feel better or gets us what we want. Falsity can do that just as well as truth, maybe even more so. And we see this demonstrated in our other lectionary reading for today from the Gospel of Matthew. In it, the chief priests are asked a question, but they resist answering truthfully for self-centered reasons. They chose to answer in a way that would avoid any accountability, that would simply calm the crowds and get them out of a jam. Their thinking was not based in truth, but in expedience. And this is the irony of that story, that they were challenging Jesus' authority, yet abdicated their own because they did not value truthfulness. They answered, "We don't know." And that is not a bad answer if meant honestly. There is definitely a lot we don't know all the time, and we should be willing to admit that. But the chief priests meant the answer falsely, even if it had the appearance of truth. For there is a big difference between humility and avoidance. Instead, in the story of striking the rock with the staff, we are reminded of the basic things we do know. As we look for truth, as we endeavor to quench our thirst, we know that the power of truth lies in goodness. We may not know the answer to everything yet, now or ever, but we know that much. And that foundational knowledge can go a long way. Last week, the Israelites asked, "What is it?" And we were reminded that when we look to God for sustenance, that might come to us in ways we don't immediately recognize. This week, we are looking less for sustenance and more for guidance. The question is more, what do we do? How do we orient our life and our behavior? And the answer is to follow the staff to the rock and watch it make the water flow. The answer is to look for truth that finds its power in love, service, sacrifice, and dignity. This is the power that quenches our thirst and keeps us on the journey. This is how the Lord is among us. Amen.